Ever feel like all your augment options just suck? That your spot is unplayable and now your game is ruined?
Like, this game is so bad.
That this augment is a 4.8, so you can't pick it.
I cannot believe my eyes.
Well, in this episode of In Too Deep, we showcase how top player Dishsoap maximize the potential of bad new augments to secure a top placement. Dishsoap will show you why knowledge is power and how he went from, quote, low random challenger player to now being one of the most knowledgeable people on the planet when it comes to TFT. All right, let's jump into it. So this game's portal is Thresh's Sanctum, which is for every 40 enemies and ally that dies, you get some extra resources, whether it's gold or extra items. So it's going to be a high economy game, meaning that you got to play for higher comp camp positions. You're not going to play nearly as aggressive, or yes, you don't have to. But you also have some options based off those extra resources. Dishsoap is going to be starting off with Kale and 2 Sorakas. That's not entirely really exciting because they're not good early. Kale in particular right now in the meta is a week 1 cost. She's getting buffed in a future patch, so hopefully she's more viable later on. Dishsoap is also sacrificing this KO, which is a really important distinction to be made because this actually counts towards the souls pool, assuming Kale dies. Okay, Kale didn't die, but the idea was really good. If Kale had died there, Dishsoap would have gotten an extra counter. Instead of being at 5, it would have been at 6. So you can see he's going to try that again. Unfortunately, I think his Kale's a little bit too tanky. I think if he tries to play another melee unit, or in this case, he plays another Malzahar, hopefully Malzahar should die. But this is a small min-max. Every single soul that you can collect will give you that extra boost to make that interest gold, or perhaps that extra item that can swing the fight. And there you have it. You see how the Malzahar died, and now we get that extra tick, and we are at 10. All right, so let's pause here at the augment and evaluate Dishsoap's spot. So right now he has 5 components, and 5 components openers are generally high tempo, meaning that you want to slam your items as much as you can because boards are going to be really strong. So this is a really first important tip, is that when you have 5 components to start off, try to find 2 items that you want to slam and play around your augment. This is because with so many people slamming items early, if you're not slamming them, most likely you're going to lose by a lot because people are going to be up 2 items versus up 1 item if you choose to stay as open and non-committal. Looking at the augments, we have Morning Light, which is actually quite a solid augment, but right now it's primarily played in Tristana reroll. The other thing you can do with Morning Light is potentially Bastions into, say, Aphelios or Zarya, just kind of backline. You just play like a traditional frontline backline combination, but it's not particularly super strong in this spot, although he does have Sunfire. Infusion is pretty underrated for an AP comp, but you kind of need to have a really good setup for it because you need to be able to stall for more than 5 seconds, right? Your units restore 15 mana, and right now he's got a bunch of 1-stars with not a lot of solid options. And then the third is a safe option, Metabolic Accelerator, but that's primarily played through a loose streak-oriented composition like Piltover, which he does not have. So I'm okay with rerolling any of them, but I'm also okay with picking potentially Morning Light. Okay, so Dishsoap re-rolled and now has the option of Parting Gifts or Combat Caster. And Combat Caster is actually quite a strong composition for things that cast a lot or get a lot of mana. So you're looking at like Invokers, for example, that give a lot of mana, or Challengers even, because you attack so much, you end up getting so much mana from that raw attack speed. But he also has a really unusual combination that he can use with Parting Gifts, where it's a new augment that says when a unit dies, it passes a copy of one of the items to the nearest ally and then shields them. And he does have the ability to make a Zizira portal while maintaining his AP line of playing an Ionic Spark. So he does have this option, and he rerolls Morning Light, implying that he's going to go for it. All right, so now we even have Void. So Void is a really strong way to win through strength through numbers. You just have so many bodies on the board. And now you have the extra Voidling, you have the Zizira that you can summon through Parting Gifts, and the Parting Gifts will transfer to the closest ally. So now you have the ability for this Cho'Gath to pass either to Kassadin or Orianna, and then from where it spawns, you'll just be able to just have so much extra HP that this Malzahar will be protected and theoretically be able to kill everything. A little bit surprised of Dishsoap positioned the Orianna so far back. Usually Orianna actually is much more of a frontline unit because she shields allies and she doesn't actually deal damage if the shield isn't near enemies. And so the positioning of how everything is working right now is actually quite interesting because Dishsoap wants the Cho'Gath to die instead of get that guaranteed feast off and get that kill because he wants to pass things off. So watch how he plays with how he second or third rows a lot of different units, thinking about what he wants to actually do with his items. I think I recommend Ionic Spark Slam because he needs to deal some more AP damage. Ionic Spark is the most important AP item shred that you can have when you play sorcerers. It's a lot better than Static Shiv if you don't have an attack speed based carry, because sorcerers are spending so much time casting that they're not actually auto attacking. Ionic Spark is particularly really good because a lot of the sorcerers go front to back. There's not a lot of big nukes in the early mid game that hits the entire board and backline, so you're gonna have to go through their front line, and Ionic Spark affects 2 hexes as their range, therefore allows you to go through that front line even quicker. He hits into Orianna too, which makes me feel like we can put Orianna even closer to Cho'Gath now. So that way we can get that guarantee for having that Zizirot chain. The problem with Dishsoap's spot here is that he doesn't actually have a lot of damage if somehow this Malzahar gets jumped on. So he has to be careful of things like rogues, like a Viego, an early Katarina that would jump onto his backline. But for now, he scouts around and sees that he's relatively strong. And he's actually so strong because he's going up against weak boards of people who might be rerolling, like this player who's going Tristana reroll with the Yoro portal delivery, that he doesn't actually even lose more than just that Cho'Gath, which means that he's in a really, really good spot. So yeah, Dishsoap basically doesn't have to roll for quite some time now and should be able to cruise to at least level 7 with a good amount of HP. The real big key to Dishsoap is how much gold will he have to roll before he gets to level 7 or level 8, because a lot of times with sorcerers, your end game is not nearly as strong until you hit Ari. So you have this big gap between playing things like Vel'Koz, Sonos, Lux, all the way to hitting not just even Ari 1, but Ari 2. And so how do you fill up that big gap is usually through HP preservation, so you can preserve a ton of gold. And so Dishsoap is going to be trying to maximize how he actually gets placements here without having to roll a lot of gold. Dishsoap levels and plays a Vi for the Bruiser. He's positioning so that way when his Cho'Gath dies, it's most likely to pass to either the Kassadin or the Vi. Going up against Appies, who has the Locket and Challenger Slam. So this is actually kind of a hard fight because it's a durable front line and there's some pretty decent DPS through things like the Samira. So once Zizirot dies, now Vi doesn't actually draw aggression. It's actually the Kassadin, but it's a little bit too much stats still with the 2-star sorcerers and all these Zizirots passing. Just look at how convincing these victories are. Not to mention that Dishsoap's also winning by many units, so he's actually doing that much more. The last thing to consider, by the way, is whether or not Zizirot portal actually counts towards the number of deaths for the portal, which is Thresh's Sanctum, and it doesn't actually. That's something that Dishsoap actually analyzed during this game, asked whether or not the Zizirot portals count towards that body count. That would be a little bit too broken if it did, but I mean, it doesn't work that way, so don't worry about it. And now he upgraded his Cho'Gath, which I think I agree with. For the most part, yes, you want the Cho'Gath to die, but you still want quality units. You don't want it to die too fast, because then, let's say all your 1-star units die very quickly, then all of a sudden, your frontline disappears too fast in the mid stages of the game, and then all of a sudden, your backline gets rushed. And now Dishsoap crosses that 43 threshold before Robin. He's able to get that extra gold and extra resources. And now he's made 30 and he's on a pretty good streak. He did prioritize tier off the carousel, so he has the ability to make Shojin. In general, with sorcerers, you want to have 1 mana item and a damage item, and either a healing item or another damage item. But it depends on who you're itemizing and how. Really clever positioning here from Dishsoap. He traps his Cho'Gath in the corner, so that way he's more likely to lose units and die. So again, he's maximizing Thresh's Sanctum, trying to get as many units killed during the PV round, because it also counts towards that body total, so he can get those max rewards at 80. So ends up making 40 gold. Drops another sword, which is a little bit unfortunate, but he does have a big duplicator, meaning that if he were to chase a Lux 2, an Ari 2, potentially 3-star 3 cost, he has that much more likelihood he's going to be able to hit. Levels to 6 because he recognizes he's on a win streak and he's most likely going to be able to dominate whoever comes through. I approve of a Shojin Slam. We talked about the mana. Plus, Shojin gives a little bit of extra AP, so a nice way for Dishsoap to get a little bit more damage onto his board. Going against Casper, who's playing Noxus, and right now Casper's got all 1-stars, so it's arguable that Dishsoap probably didn't need to level up here to win. He could have been over 40, maybe 50 gold with that extra EXP, but I think it's better to be safe than sorry here for Dishsoap because he's got a lot to figure out. Dishsoap's positioning is really interesting. They third row to everything to try and make sure that this Cho'Gath dies, but he doesn't want to like fully backline isolate it because he wants to make sure these melee units can get into contact with his opponents. All right, so Dishsoap hits Sorcerer Heart, Bruiser Heart, and Cybernetic Leash. This is not actually particularly a hard choice because with Sorcerers, you want to go vertical as much as you can. The big breakpoint is 6 Sorcerer over 4 because then you double the amount of death explosions that deal that damage based off that max HP. And so Sorcerers are really, really strong to stack at the moment. This allows Dishsoap to go for 6 Sorcerers at level 7. So he is in a very, very good spot. And now he's scouting around and seeing what is actually strong. 2 other people are streaking as well. If he's an Eternal Winter, for example. That's something that Sorcerers actually have the edge on. So Eternal Winter is a very common item currently in the metagame where a lot of people like to get attack speed carries slowed down or even frozen from repeatedly damaging it. But Sorcerers spend a lot of their time casting, and therefore, while they do get stunned, are less impacted by that Eternal Winter. Dishsoap's positioning, unfortunately, allows things like the Vi to die a little bit early, but thankfully, because of things like the Orianna casting the shield, ends up staying alive. So the Vi dies, now passes over to Swain. Let's say Swain died, it passed over to either of these units. So you can start to see why Parting Gives Zizirot is truly oppressive if you set it up correctly, and why this 4.8 is not actually truly representative of where this augment's placement is. Dishsoap scouting around, seeing what are the other hard matchups that he has to position for, but for the most part, all he has to do is really think about how to protect his Kassadin and his Malzahar, because if that Spark dies, he loses a big amount of the shred. Going up against Yasuo with 3 items, and Yasuo does have that backline access, and you can see how the Zizirot portal didn't time correctly because of that backline access. So in some ways, this felt like the bad matchup for Dishsoap because the Yasuo basically jumps past all of the targets that have Zizirot. So it's a little bit unfortunate, but it goes back to one of the weaknesses of this composition is that if your opponent has ways to leapfrog that front line or get past the Zizirot holder, you're going to eventually struggle to combo it. But that's okay because Dishsoap started off on a really good front and he's still in a great spot. We have Open Sword and Vest. I do think that people over-index on offensive items, but in this case, we have so much offense that I'd like to take a Rod. He does end up going for it because you want to convert off of the sword more than anything right now. Swords are useful to make things like Shojin and Gunblade and Giant Slayer, but you don't want too many of them because you ultimately want things like Jewel Gauntlet in order to capitalize off your high source of AP. That being said, I would go for Gunblade. I do think it's very, very good to keep your front line alive and also make sure that that backline damage, whether through Deadeye, AoE Splash, or backline access like Rogue, doesn't completely overwhelm your carry. Just a level 7 going up against a level 6 player. This is a Tristana player that hits. Generally recommend to go to level 7 if you can make 30 gold or more at 3-5, especially if you're in a position where you are really healthy, because it keeps you in a really strong position of power and you don't need to greed. Like if Dishsoap didn't level, he would basically be making only 1 more gold per turn, and he does get to get an extra unit like this Vi or this Teemo for the extra AP. So while he does lose, it's still important for him to maintain that tempo presence and be able to be competitive. He just hit a Lux in his shop, so now kind of an interesting spot of whether or not you actually transfer your items. He goes for 6 Sorcerers. Does he sell this Malzahar to play these 2 items onto Lux? It's kind of dicey, but he does have a Lux pair through the form of that big duplicator. So he's very, very likely to roll down here at 7, find 1 more Lux, and use that duplicator immediately to get Lux 2. And that will solve most of Dishsoap's mid game. So definitely a pretty high roll mid game where he's able to hit the Sorcerer Heart and hit the Lux. But he's also utilized a lot of the resources that he has at his disposal. Oh my god. He takes a massive loss. This is a Yasuo too and a Kaisa, but I wonder if positioning a little bit different actually would have made a huge impact. All right, let's watch this fight one more time to see how the Zizirot passes, because there's so many units that barely survived. I feel like if he positioned differently, it would have made a big impact. And so the first Zizirot dies, and it goes onto the Orianna instead of things like the Kassadin, which means that the Kassadin's going to die, and this Orianna is a little bit too far back. This is what I was talking about before, where you have to consider where you position Orianna because she's one of the more fragile sorcerers that wants to shield allies that are low. And so you can put Orianna in that second or even that first row potentially. Probably not, because you want the Zizirot to die a little bit earlier. But yeah, because of that, that chain reaction didn't go off the way he wanted to. If it went to Kassadin and then Orianna and then to some of the other units like the Vel'Koz, he most likely would have preserved 2, 4, maybe even 6 life. So these are the small things that could potentially optimize Dishsoap's game even further. But that's okay. 3 loss, 63 HP. We did go from 100 to 63, so pretty brutal losses to take over 3 fights, but we're still in a pretty good spot. And Dishsoap does have to roll here because he's on a Malzahar pair, which he wants to replace with the Malzahar and move the items to Lux. And also, he wants to hit things like the Sona, the Jarvan potentially, because Jarvan and Sona links to that Demacia and gets that free Radiant item onto Lux. Holds on to some of these Void units just in case he wants to play all the Voids. He does have Kai'Sa 2 available. It's Jarvan, but all he has to do is find 1 extra Lux, and there it is. So he's going to transfer the items for sure now because Lux 2 is very strong compared to Malzahar 2. And his positioning hasn't really changed that much, but the good news is that he is so much stronger now. And because he hit things like the 2-star Swain and the Kassadin, his front line's much stronger. And it goes to show you that, yes, you don't actually need to keep everything at 1 star for those Zerots to die. Upgrade that front line and keep yourself strong. Not making gold here, which I agree. All these pairs are really, really valuable. He does get introduced with 2 really interesting augments. Gifts from the Fallen is a lot like Darkstar from the past, which if you remember, even the mutant variation from set 6, very powerful on ally death. We even had a little bit of the set 8 with admin. Bastion Crest is not particularly strong. Our frontline is actually quite good because of the Zerot passing. Plus, we don't really want to play that many Bastions unless we go for a lot of them. 2 Bastion is not particularly strong in the late game, and it'd be a little bit too disruptive to play for 4 Bastion, even though we have Tark and Kassadin. Tactical superiority is interesting to me because we do want to play Jarvan. We have the Tima and we have the Swain, so we do want to lean into it. It is actually a lot of stats also because it's doubled when you field a strategist, so it's actually 20 AD and AP on all your champions. But if you think about it, Gifts of the Fallen gives you 20 when 4 allies die, and we have a lot of allies, so Gifts from the Fallen has a higher ceiling. So I like that a little bit better than tactical superiority, despite the fact that both of the options pretty solid from this point. Not to mention, Dishsoap just highlighted that he's playing Thresh's Sanctum, so he actually wants his units to die. So Gifts from the Fallen even has more synergies because the more things die, the more you're collecting souls and the stronger your units get. So it all kind of feeds into each other, which brings us to another really important point. Stack augments with portal synergies for this set. If you have something that synergizes with the portal, that is an extra good reason of why you should be picking that augment. Cats around. Other people are high rolling too. Aphelios too, with some really powerful setups. Sees that Robin Song's already FF'd, made a note that there's 1 less strong opponent in this lobby. He's going up against Eternal Winter, which actually does affect Lux. She does end up getting stunned and chilled from it, so kind of annoying. But this is why sorcerers are good versus the Eternal Winter. You can see that, yes, there's like the chilling effect and a little bit of stuns, but they spend so much of their time dealing that damage, not auto-attacking, that you're able to get past it. Plus, Nubal didn't really have a 2-star carry to punish him for taking it a little bit slow. The main downside of Dishsoap's composition right now is that he doesn't have a high burst outside of Giant Slayer. He's got Shojin to cast, Gunblade to heal, and he has to wait for things like the Gifts of the Fallen to kick in before he gets a lot of power. So he's a little bit more of a ramping scenario. Oh dear, Dishsoap ran into a counter scenario where Casper Zephyr'd the Zizirot, so the Zizirot is not actually able to pass very quickly. If Casper actually had meaningful damage instead of this Warwick 2 to get onto the Lux, that would have been a pretty nasty counter, but it looks like Casper, unfortunately, was low rolling a little bit too hard. You see that 16 HP, 0 gold. This is the opposite end of the snowballing effect of Noxus. So Dishsoap ended up getting pretty fortunate as the opponent didn't have a lot of damage to follow it up. But that is a really important thing to note, which is in the future, if your opponent's playing Zephyr, make sure to dodge those Zephyr attempts onto your Zizirot holders. Dishsoap could use more damage. Again, I do think we're damage light. He has 2 gloves. Jewel Gauntlet is one of the best items you can make for sorcerers because you get all that flat AP, and he has even more flat stats from Gifts of the Fallen. Oh, he's gonna level here to 8 to play Jarvan most likely here and get that Demacian in, and he gets a Radiant Stone play. There's an argument for him to slam not just the Jewel Gauntlet but even the Shroud. There's a lot of people who are clumping right now, things like Zeke's, Chalices. Not to mention there's some really high impact champions like enemy Jarvans, for example, or Sejuani's or Shens that you can shroud that's really, really strong. Dishsoap is queuing up into the Tristana reroll player who is fully online and does end up dodging a really crucial shroud. Looks like the shroud didn't hit the right side of his board, so his luck's able to cast. But the ZZ Rod passing is stalling, and it doesn't win the fight, but it helps him clean up a couple of these units, which is really nice. So even though he doesn't win this fight because the other player is very, very strong, he's able to at least preserve that HP. Just so considering fanning out, recognize that his opponent has things like Mana Burn, which is the new augment that gives you an extra shroud and anti-heals your entire team when you get hit by it. So now it has to kind of divide and conquer and distribute. And it's less important that now he's ZZ Rot passes because he's also in a spot where the Jarvan, for example, if he's too far back, might not get an optimal AoE ult. So, you know, Jarvan has to actually make sure to get to that front line. You don't want to just solo frontline the ZZ Rot the entire time. And so as Dishsoap collects his extra win, this brings us to another important concept, which is in the late game, don't greed max value just because it worked in the early and mid game. I think a lot of people get caught up in the idea of like, well, I have this thing that says buff adjacent allies or get maximum Zeeks and Chalice value through adjacent ally buffs. But that kind of stuff can really bait you if you're not careful because it ends up sabotaging things like positioning or the value of your unit's abilities in the late stages of the game. And right now we're at the end of 4-7. Dishsoap no longer really optimizing for the Thresh of Sanctum. He did such a good job getting there, but he could have actually like sacrificed, for example, Malzahar. It's a really small thing, but hey, he got to 160 anyways, so it all worked out. And now I'm down to slam 2 Shrouds here, or Thieves Gloves and Bramble Vest. Given that Shrouds can be really impactful, for example, this person full clumping, he can go for Shrouds on the entirety of the board, so I really like double Shroud here. Not to mention that he's playing a ZZ Rot based strategy, so if he makes a Bramble Vest onto somebody, the Bramble Vest might actually stop that unit from dying, and then as a result, things like the Taric and the Kassadin might die before, say, the Swain. The downside is Shrouds end up potentially getting passed around. So you pass the Shroud, for example, on this Kassadin, it's not that good. So it's a trade-off. But at this point, once again, we're not trying to greed that value. That Shroud is so good in the late stages of the game that it's worth risking that Shroud passing because you're able to really stifle a lot of people's early fights with the double Shroud. Thinking about how we can tech in potential Rise, but I think we're going to level 9. And ultimately, level 9, we're also looking for Ahri. We're going to most likely drop the Void because yes, the Void is nice to get that extra summon, get that extra death. At the same time, you want to play higher quality units. So he's thinking about Ahri. He's thinking about, you know, potentially playing Scion and Rise. These legendary champions which just more than make up for playing 2-star Kassadin and 1-star Malzahar. Oh dear, we're losing quite badly to Tristana player repeatedly. So this is something to think about for Dishsoap's perspective, which is how you can find ways to beat the board that you're most likely to face in the later stages of the game. So he's gonna have to think about that. I think that if I were in Dishsoap's spot, I'd probably have to prioritize positioning Jarvan. Oh, he's rolling at 8 here because he feels like he wants to secure the top 4 and he doesn't feel strong enough to go to 9. The more I think about it, the more I like rolling on 8 here because he does have things that he could hit. For example, the 2-star 3 cost that he was playing, like the Sona and the Taric and the Jarvan. But also the fact that he could easily go to 9 and then have nothing to play besides a Rise 1. And then he's stuck with Malzahar 1, Sona 1, Jarvan 1, Rise 1, and then he just dies into a 5th place. So I think the roll here was justified. And he also kept a good amount of gold, so he can still get to 9 by the end of the stage. I think a lot of people feel like if you roll, you're either rolling all or none of your gold. You can still roll like 10 to 15 gold, evaluate, and then find ways to build that economy back. Not to mention, this is also a Thresh of Sanctum, so you're getting more gold potentially at 200, 240, and then that's the way you can get to level 9 again. Looking for blue buff so you can get to something on Rise or Ahri in the late stage of the game. Does not get it. Instead, takes Guard Breaker because, again, he wants more damage. Guard Breaker very good with Jewel Gauntlet because Jewel Gauntlet gives your ability to crit, but it doesn't give you 100% chance to crit. And so that extra glove-based item increases your chance that this Vel'Koz is going to crit and hit that much harder. At this point, Dishsoap is scouting his matchup, knows he's going against Nubao, trying to dodge the Shroud and get his Shroud onto things like the K'Sante. And unfortunately, he hit everything but the Azir, but I don't think that's the biggest of deals because I'm pretty sure we lose anyways. That's a 2-star Shen with Eternal Winter. They didn't die to the Lux beams. We're getting Mana Reeve in the middle of the fight. The Casante's on our back line. Azir's not getting touched. So yeah, we lose this fight anyways. Also, I think there's like a slight position optimization that Dishsoap could do where he could put Sona on the corner. Sona actually does want to hit the allies because it gives an attack speed buff. And with things like Shojin, that ends up mattering a lot. Lux attacks that much quicker, ends up beaming a little bit faster. So that's something that Dishsoap could do. So it's going to be down to positioning. Top 3 is secured, so it's really about whether or not Dishsoap can play for more than third. At this point, Dishsoap also sold his Lux because he doesn't think that he can actually roll for Lux 3. Generally, the rule of thumb is you want around 7 copies and 70 gold in order to justify rolling at 8 for a 4-cost 3-star, because that's just the maximum odds for you to hit in a reasonable manner. Your odds aren't really high. I think it's a little bit under 50%. Don't quote me on that. But it's definitely like your best shot if you have that many copies, which goes to show you how hard it is to hit a 4-cost 3-star, especially because it depends on how many people are playing 4-cost. For example, in this spot, Draynox is playing reroll Tristana. There's not many 4-costs being pulled out of the pool, and Nubal is the only other player playing 4-cost. And so you're telling me with 5 other players dead and 1 player not playing 4-cost, there's not many people that are yoinking things like the Sejuani, the Aphelios, the other 4-costs. So I actually really like this call to go to 9, although it does feel like kind of dicey because we don't have that much gold. 20 gold to roll. If we can hit things like Ahri, that'd be huge. Rise is Shadow Isles. Oh, we did hit the Ahri here, which is very nice. No blue buff, but that's okay. We still have AP items to put, and we hit Jarvan too. And so now the name of the game is to stall for the Ahri, which is really important. When Ahri gets that 3rd cast off, she does so much AoE damage to the board. Another thing to consider is Ahri's positioning is really important in this set because whoever she deals that damage to will end up getting Mana Reeve, so you can stop things like the Jarvan, the Casantes, the Sejuanis from being able to cast immediately. It's a fortunate matchup where he goes up against the Ghosts, and it looks like leveling to 9 with that Jarvan 2 has made a big difference. Nubal loses, so now Dishsoap just has to get 1 more win in order to get top 2. And if you can find things like the Rise 2 and the Ahri 2, this could end up being the dub. Rise 2 with Shadow Isles is very good. One of the best Rises currently because reviving those allies, while it doesn't count for things like Gifts of the Fallen and Thresh's Sanctum, is still really good to just get things in the way. It leans into the win condition of what Dishsoap is trying to do. I like that Dishsoap also is selling things like his Shroud and trying to get optimal placements on it. Even this late stage of the fight, he's fighting for positions in the lobby as best as he can. Casante is really scary, but looks like he's running out of gas. That follow-up cast with Ahri and Lux on the same side is enough big damage, wiping the entire back line. And that is the important thing about Ahri, is that she is able to reach that back line and deal big damage to opponents. And then maybe things like Sona, maybe that extra Jarvan cast can clean things up. He has Shen 2 here in his shop. If he really wants to, he can sell something. He sells his Rise to get to Shen 2. So at this point, this is purely a move because Dishsoap is low HP. If he had 2 lives, he absolutely would wait 1, I think, in order to get it. But right now, he's just trying desperately to stabilize. And while Rise is really nice, it's not crucial because, like we said, it doesn't synergize with Gifts of the Fallen the way you hope it would. And things with Thresh's Sanctum is not really that important at this stage of the game. In general, when you're this late, it's a 1v1. Things like, oh, I want to get Thresh's Sanctum value with the portals is not really that important because it gets you that extra gold or maybe that 1 component, but it's not going to be as swingy. Looking for probably anything that helps stall or deals damage. I think Warmogs makes the most sense. I think Shojin is bait in this situation because right now the problem is that his front line is Zizirats with no actual resistances. In fact, there's actually a case for him to remove this Jarvan and put the Warmogs onto the Jarvan, onto the bench. Instead of actually putting it onto the Shen. But the Shen is also perfectly a fine user of it. He has a Bastion, so it scales with some of the resistances that he get. And Shen puts that shield up, so it's actually kind of nice. I guess if you put the Radiant item on Sona, it's very hit or miss. Sometimes it could be really good, and sometimes it's not that useful. But either way, I actually kind of like it the more I think about it. Dishsoap doesn't have anti-heal, so having the Sunfire cape is actually pretty crucial to stop the front line from infinitely healing. Baynox. Oh my goodness gracious. The Ahri damage is so high. I was worried about having no mana, no blue buff onto this Ahri, but it looks like that Ionia bonus is really key, which goes to show you how Dishsoap is paying attention to small things. Like, I don't have a mana item on Ahri, so going for Karma for the Ionia to get that passive mana gain is actually really big. So dropping things like Rise in these late game scenario was also a really good move by Dishsoap. Spreading out his backline, trying to dodge Shroud. If you want to Shroud me, you can Shroud only a couple of the units, which is really smart. And if Dishsoap can win this next fight convincingly, he can win out and closes out with the first place. Ahri is not getting targeted. Looks like Tristana is stuck on the ZZ Rod portals. ZZ Rod still chaining in the late stages of the game. And that's going to do it. Dishsoap with a parting gifts come from behind victory in the late stages in order to clean out a first and continue to cement his first place standings on top of the North American ladder, 1-1-1. So there you have it. Dishsoap's very clean Sorceress game using a very weak augment in the data, 4.8 for parting gifts. But hey, Dishsoap's a player that knows how to really use and abuse the best parts of these augments. What do you think about his play? Did I miss anything? Was there any small things that he was also optimizing that I didn't catch? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.